first thing I'm going to do is I've got the bottle filled up. The valve gauge is showing a pressure of 13 MPa. And with that, I just want to put a shot over the chrony prior to doing anything with the hammer spring. The pellets I have are RWS Super Point Extras. .5 grain. Just a little bit heavier than the Crosman Premiers. $7.25. $7.35. This gun is so much more quieter than my 2289. It actually, based on the sound level, I always think I'm going to get some low velocity. $7.35. Now let's see if we could get something different with a different hammer spring. So I messed around and found a heavier hammer spring than the heaviest hammer spring that comes with the conversion kit. Overall, it was more coils per inch. It was a thicker wire. I cut it to the same length that the kit springs were in length. But I was having a hard time, not a hard time, it was impossible to cock the gun. So I went ahead and did the grinding to this. I took the trigger guard off and apart and did grinding to the sear as is recommended in two places on the sear. Underneath where on the bottom of the sear where the trigger makes contact with it, and also the hook part that sticks up that catches the hammer. I ground down on the flat that leads up to it, and then back the hook part, ground that back a bit. Overall, what it leads to is engagement of the hammer now, which it's got a much longer trigger pull, so I'm trying to get used to that. But with that said, and as you saw, the first two shots with everything with the kit's heavy hammer spring and the power adjuster adjusted all the way in, I got two shots off. One was at 7.25 and one was at 7.35. Well, with this hammer spring, $7.76. So that would be a new high as far as velocity for me. You know, I did manage to hit 760 at one point, but I'm going to keep shooting, look for accuracy and velocity. See, again, I'm re-looking for a sweet spot in terms of pressure, and the hammer overcoming any pressure inside the valve that's too high and working its way down to that spot where everything just seems to work together very well. The hammer opening up the valve and maximizing the air getting into the barrel, pushing the pellet out. So I'm going to continue working on that, but I'm pretty happy. Got to get used to the trigger all over again, but I am happy with the increase in velocity. That 776 came with a pressure of 14 MPa in the valve. With this heavier hammer spring and having issues before with the other hammer spring, the heavy one that came with the kit, and the hammer being able or not being able to really overcome the pressure in the valve, not release as much air as I would have liked. I'm going to see how this reacts with this heavier hammer spring and it being filled up to 15 MPa, which is the maximum. The heavier hammer spring, it does seem to be using, watching the gauge and watching the air go down, it is definitely using more air. Okay, well, this is pretty cool. The heavier hammer spring is overcoming, it is allowing the valve to be pressurized to its maximum, 15 MPa. And that's what it just shot. 805 feet per second. With a 14 point, what were these RWS? I said it before. 14.5 grain RWS pointed 22 caliber pellet. I was actually hoping and thinking, hoping I could hit 800 feet per second, but thinking not only was it going to take a heavier hammer spring, but a lighter valve spring in order to do it. Now, you know, I haven't done anything with the valve. Because of how much relatively easy it is to switch out hammer springs, I went that route. And just with the heavier hammer spring has gotten me over 800 feet per second. But if I'm getting 20 foot-pounds of energy from this little gun, you can see I got a pretty big smile on my face. It pretty much says it all. It's already down to 13 MPa. So it is a much bigger air guzzler with this heavy hammer spring. But again, if plinking is what I want to do, or just come down here and fire off a bunch of shots, number one, I could back off the power adjuster or switch it back to the CO2 version. Nice feature about the gun. But right now we're going to top it back off. What I want to do and see what kind of velocity I can get is with the heaviest 22 caliber pellet that I have. The heaviest ones that I have are the H&N Barracuda Hunter Extreme. That's 19.09 grain. Pretty happy with the accuracy that I've been getting. But now that we're topped off to 15 MPa once again, the Barracuda Hunter Extreme, 19.09 grain. .733, because I'm interested in looking at foot-pounds of energy. So having gone to Pyramyd Air and did the number crunching and finding out the foot-pounds of energy with those RWS pointed pellets, checking 14.5 grain, shooting 805 feet per second. That comes out to almost 21 foot-pounds of energy, 20.87 foot-pounds of energy. So I do have a 20 plus foot-pound of energy air gun. Simply converting a 2400 KT CO2 Crosman custom shop gun to high pressure air. The other pellet that I tried was the H&N Barracuda Hunter Extreme. That's 19.09 grain. That shot 733 feet per second. Now, because of the extra weight of that pellet, even though the velocity is down compared to the RWS pellets, foot-pounds of energy calculate out to 22.78 foot-pounds of energy, almost 23 foot-pounds of energy using those heavy Barracuda Hunter Extreme H&N pellets. So, really satisfied with that. As I said, I'm still getting used to the trigger. It's going to take a while. It's much heavier. I have the sear spring adjusted all the way down, so it's as light as it can be. But as far as that adjustment goes, I guess I could try a lighter spring for the sear, see if that helps. But for right now, I think I'm just going to concentrate on getting used to how it is. With that heavy hammer spring, it's definitely a much heavier pull to the trigger. So that's where I'm at now as far as updates.